Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Can't Believe I Made It podcast. I'm your podcast host, Desi Abeda. On this Mentorship Monday slash Heroes Journey episode, obviously today is MLK Day, and one of the things that I really wanted to do from a podcast perspective is really to celebrate the mammoth of a man this individual was, and what he meant for legacies beyond what was going on during that time. And so for today, I'm super excited about this episode, and I hope you are too. I want to discuss the power of purpose and the lessons that we can learn from Dr. Martin Luther King's life on habits and rituals. And when we kind of bring it back to that time, obviously, a lot of you who are listening right now are really only reading and listening and learning about his life. And you might have had grandparents or people before you who have told you stories of what was going on during this time. But one of the things that I really want to put an emphasis on when you are looking to impact change across legacies, you're going to have to do some really uncomfortable things. You're going to have to really go as an individual to some really uncomfortable places in order to get what you need to get out of an experience that's going to be hard. And as we look back in his life, one of the things that I felt like was incredibly influential was not only just what he did on a day-to-day basis and what he was able to do as a whole, but as we look back, this is how we know him. We know Dr. Martin Luther King as a civil rights activist. We know that he was able to take part and lead a monumental civil rights movement, and his ability to inspire and mobilize others to join the struggle for equal rights was on top of one of those things that is just so important. And we also know him as a skilled speaker, and he used his speeches to communicate his message of nonviolence and racial equality to a broader audience. And for any of us who have ever taken the time to sit down and to write a speech and to execute it and to inspire change, you know what type of process leads up to this. Because there's that moment, obviously, where you are sharing the message and you're sharing that type of change and that type of inspiration, but there's a lot of work that goes into it. And so for all my creatives out there who are listening to this podcast, I want us to look at this through the lens of what it looks like to truly fall in love with the process. And then we also know he was a mad genius of tactics such as peaceful protests, sit-ins, and boycotts to effect change. To me, when I think about that, not only is the inspiration piece is a big one for me, and one of the things that I really value about um, Dr. Martin Luther King. But when you can inspire change across communities, that's where you get to impact people's lives. And you can't impact people's lives until you're truly able to sit in some of their really uncomfortable feelings and you're able to speak to their heart in a way where it inspires some discomfort in things that they're doing. And as we look back, and this is obviously how we know him. Again, looking at this through the lens of how do we fall in love with the process and what can we learn from MLK in the way that we navigate our own process, a lot has to be said about what he did on a day-to-day basis rather to get there. And so when we look at perfecting the process, and I've been posting a great deal of this, resharing certain posts that really spoke to me, resharing messages with the tagline, in quotes, the process, because all of our process is going to look different. And as we look back on Dr. King's life, I think one of the things that I really value is his time and intention of not only just planning and continuing to do the work of equal rights, but even taking a step back of how he spent his days, what he really looked at from the standpoint of, hey, what does self-care look like for me in my life in this season? We know that MLK was known for his commitment to the civil rights movement, and his ability to inspire was something that I think is continues to be even. I mean, what's the math right now? you know, even 60 years later, I think is just so crazy when we say this out loud. We also know that he was obviously known for his strong work ethic and his discipline. We know this through stories, we know this through how people spoke about him. And I think that's another piece there that I think is extremely special, is kind of looking back on your life and how this can impact you and how this message can impact you. Is if you weren't here, like what would your core group of people say about you? Because we've dealt with this from the standpoint of building these identity based habits, right? That's our third layer of like, hey, how does the world perceive you? So one big message that I want us to get out of this as we're listening in on this is taking a pause and saying, right now, with where I'm at, what would my friends and family, what would my social five say about me? Right? It's just a little bit more of a critical thinking tool that I want you to be thinking about. We know from his life that he spent long hours each day working on his speeches. Again, it goes back to the process, organizing protests and meetings, and then responding to correspondence. This points back to, I mean, if you kind of look back on his life, obviously we know up to this point how his life ended, at such a young age, and the type of work that he was doing. We also know why he was at risk, because he was preaching a message that a lot of people felt threatened by. So when we look back at it, I mean, he had all of these things happening around him, yet he still was so damn purposeful. And not only the message, but also from a legacy standpoint, what he was doing. He understood the risks of putting himself out there. And ultimately his demise was just that. But I think when we look forward, one of the things that really speaks to me, and one of the things that I would love for you to continue to examine, is maybe you're not at in any sort of danger in your type of process, but I want you to be so damn purposeful that during the days where you might feel the risk or the threat of some mental health issue, or the threat of self-doubt or imposter syndrome, or the threat of whatever's going on for you, is to be really still and to be really purposeful in why you're doing this in the first place. I think that's one really big thing that we can take from Dr. King's life that I really value from a habits and rituals standpoint. We also know that he believed in the importance of self-care and made sure to schedule time for rest and relaxation. We know this because we actually got some insight into his day, and I think one of the things that's really cool about this is, in addition to all of his work, right? So correspondence, navigating speeches, navigating travel, navigating his team, all of these things. We know that Dr. King had a daily routine, and that included three things, three main things, if you will. So prayer, meditation, and then also reading. And I think there's a lot to be said when it comes to that, because for him, he believed in the power not only of prayer, but he looked at it as a way to connect with this higher power and to gain strength and guidance for the type of work that he was doing. We haven't really talked a great deal about spirituality as it pertains to your high performance habits, things that really speak to you. But I think it's appropriate right now to take a look and say, like, what does my relationship with spirituality look like? Because there's no right way to do it. And I think as I've gone on in my process inside of my relationship with spirituality, I've understood that just like myself, it has continued to evolve with where I am at. So as you're looking at your specific and individual habits and rituals, I think one gift that